Student loan debt isn't just a personal mistake. For millions of borrowers, it's a financial system, problem-driven by compound interest, repayment structures, and widespread misunderstandings. In this video, I want to explain how student loan debt quietly snowballs over time, why so many borrowers end up owing far more than they originally borrowed, and what people often misunderstand at the very beginning. I'll be using a real borrower experience as a case study, including my own, not to give financial advice, but to explain how the system actually works in real life. A while ago, I came across a story that really stopped me in my tracks. A borrower started with around $60,000 in student loan debt, and over time, that balance grew to $150,000, mostly due to interest. At first, that number sounded extreme, but the more I looked into it, the more uncomfortable it became, because that story was uncomfortably close to my own experience. In my early 20s, I thought student loans were simply the normal way to pay for college. Borrow the money, get the degree, land a decent job, and pay it off over time. Everyone around me was doing it, so it didn't feel like a risky decision. Looking back now, one of my biggest regrets wasn't borrowing money for education. It was borrowing far more than I actually needed without slowing down to question the long-term cost. I chose an expensive private school largely because of its name and perceived prestige. My family encouraged it. The school sounded impressive, and almost no one talked seriously about the price tag. I didn't aggressively search for scholarships. I didn't compare public university options. And I didn't explore community college transfers or lower-cost paths. I simply signed the paperwork. And by the time I graduated, I had accumulated over $60,000 in student loan debt. With hindsight, I can say this clearly. If I had slowed down and researched properly, I could have cut that number nearly in half. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's about recognizing how easy it is to make high-impact financial decisions at an age when long-term consequences feel abstract. Another regret that compounded the problem was choosing a degree without a clear plan for what came next. I chose a versatile major because I was told it opened the door to many careers. In theory, that sounded reasonable. But in reality, the path was far narrower than expected. Halfway through, I realized it wasn't something I wanted to pursue long-term, and the income prospects didn't align with the debt I was taking on. At that point, the financial commitment was already locked in, and I was paying for an education that didn't translate directly into a career capable of comfortably supporting the loan payments. Where things truly started to spiral was interest. I began on the standard repayment plan, but like many people, life happened. Job changes, income fluctuations, and unexpected expenses pushed me into forbearance. Payments paused, which felt like relief at the time, but interest didn't stop. It kept accumulating. Later, I switched to an income-driven repayment plan based on my income. Some months, my required payment dropped to zero. That sounded like a lifeline. But here, guess what many borrowers don't fully understand. $0 payments do not mean zero cost. Unpaid interest continues to accrue, and in some cases it capitalizes, meaning interest gets added to the principal and future interest is charged on a larger balance. What once felt manageable slowly snowballed into something far more intimidating. This is not financial advice. It's an example of how student loan systems function in practice, especially when interest, deferment, and long timelines interact. And the long-term impact goes far beyond the balance itself. Student loan debt influenced nearly every major life decision I made. Buying a home became significantly harder because my debt load reduced what I could qualify for by nearly half. Plans for starting a family were delayed. Career flexibility felt limited, and even simple peace of mind was harder to come by. It often felt like paying a long-term penalty for trying to invest in education. Eventually, things changed. Not overnight, but gradually. I stopped avoiding the problem and treated the debt like a financial system to understand, not a source of personal shame. I researched refinancing options and lowered my interest rate. I adjusted repayment strategies to manage cash flow without allowing interest to spiral unnecessarily. I took on side work, nothing glamorous, and directed every extra dollar toward the principal. I tracked expenses carefully, built a sustainable budget, and focused on consistency rather than perfection. Over time, the balance started to fall. Progress became visible, and the psychological weight began to lift. Today, I'm on a clear path toward being debt-free, much sooner than I once thought possible. If I could go back and speak to my younger self, I'd offer simple advice. Slow down before borrowing. Ask uncomfortable questions. Understand the real return on a degree. Explore lower-cost alternatives. And test career paths before committing to decades of payments. Student loans are not just college money. They are long-term financial decisions that can shape decades of life. But no matter where you are right now, it's not too late to regain control through understanding, planning, and intentional action. If you want to better understand how debt, income, and long-term financial decisions actually interact, consider subscribing for more financial education content. And if you're comfortable sharing, what's been your biggest student loan regret or the best decision you made to manage it?